Well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad you could join us this evening. My name is Suzanne Mason. I'm with the Autism Society of Maryland. Tonight, you're joining us for a webinar called Tracking IEP Progress Mid-Year. With a quarter two completed and the end of the year not far away, it's time to grab your child's IEP and progress report and review how to track progress in 3 easy steps. Learn what to do if your child isn't making progress, and how to use the data to advocate for ESY, additional services, or compensatory education services. Before we begin, though, I would like to introduce, before we begin and I introduce today's speaker, we are offering simultaneous interpretation for Spanish speakers. We're going to remain together for this introduction and instructions. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our interpreter, Alicia, and she's going to help me explain how this works. All right. So if you would like to access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe at the bottom center of the screen and then click on Spanish. Once you are in the Spanish channel, you will hear the interpreter at 80% and the presenter just at 20%. And please go ahead and access that channel at this time and let us know if you have any difficulty. Alicia, will you please explain those instructions? Thank you. And let us know when you're ready. Okay, thank you so much, Alicia. So I just would like to remind you to keep your cameras off and to remain muted throughout the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end. And during the presentation, if you would put them into the chat, then we can cover everything and hopefully not miss anything for you. So as I mentioned, we're recording this presentation and we'll be posting it in English and Spanish on the Awesome website, along with the slide deck and any other materials that our presenter has for you tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our presenter, Beth Benevides. She is with the Hussman Institute for Autism, and she also is a consultant for us, the Autism Society of Maryland. Beth is a longtime policy and educational advocate for individuals and families affected by autism and related disabilities. She serves as a consultant for Awesome, providing one-on-one special education consultation to parents of children with any disability in Howard County as part of our annual Community Service Partnership Grant through the Howard County Department of Community Resources and Services. She is a past president of Awesome and is Associate Director of Outreach at the Hussman Institute. Beth serves on a number of statewide work groups devoted to programs, education, civil rights, and policy affecting those with autism. She's an advisory member of the Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities at Kennedy Krieger Institute, an appointed member of the Maryland Department of Disabilities Ethan Saylor Alliance for Self-Advocates Steering Committee, and is a certified special education advocate and member of the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, otherwise known as COPA. And Beth is mom to a young adult son with autism. Welcome, Beth, and please correct any of that we maybe didn't get quite right. So
nope, that's
glad
all.
to have you with us. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to you and take it away. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. I am, as Suzanne said, Beth Benevides, and very happy to be here to go over IEP progress with you. Especially during this mid-year, quarter two has ended, and I have lots of parents that are calling for support and saying, I don't know if my child's making progress, or my child isn't making sufficient progress, and I don't know how to tell the teacher that. And so this presentation is really going to help you do that. It's going to show you how you can take the reins of this. And you don't have to settle with just making sufficient progress or not making sufficient progress or achieved. I mean, you can really dig in and see if those statements are true. We want to look at what's been helpful during the year and what hasn't been, and if there's anything else your child might need. So even though we're halfway through the school year, it's not too late to change things for the year. It's not too late to get in there and really make some changes to see if the second part of the year can go better, if there are concerns. And it's a great time to take a pause and see what's working with this group of teachers that your children have right now. So let me just advance my slides. So tonight we're going to I'll provide you with tips on how to track progress. We'll define what sufficient progress is. We'll determine whether goals are appropriate, and we'll uncover some teacher tips throughout your child's IEP and the quarter 2 notes that you received, all those progress notes. We're going to uncover some teacher tips through there that you can later bring up to get the right accommodations and supports for your child. So I always like to just remind parents that the IEP is a legal document. So this is, by law, you have an IEP. This says everything from who, what, why, where, and how the instruction is going to be provided. It's all in the IEP. So really think of it as a legal document. What's in there is what your child should be provided, okay? And I always remind parents that your participation is so incredible. The law says that parents have a right to participate in the IEP process, and that's because you're the strongest possible advocate for your own children. Parents are recognized as integral members of the IEP team and equal partners in the development. And you're an equal partner in all meeting discussions. I know sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but you really have to put that kind of armor on, that I'm just as important as everyone else around the table, and my voice matters just as much. You have rights and responsibilities to participate in all decisions. I'm going to go over a couple rules that are going to be really important for you to know, namely the 10-day rule. Parents are entitled to know of all IEP meetings to discuss their children at least 10 calendar days prior to the meeting date. And notice is provided in writing. It has to be provided in writing. And so when you get this is a procedural safeguard. And a lot of times teams will say, oh, let's have an IEP meeting next week, or let's get together. It's within the 10-day notice. You won't have 10 days, and we'll just need you to waive that. So what does that mean exactly? So what it means is that the law says you have 10 days to know of a meeting. And if you're not provided that 10 days, then you have to sign something that says you understand that you did have a right to the 10 days and you're waiving that right. Okay, so that's really important. If you do not want to meet and you haven't had a 10-day notice, then you can say, I need to reschedule so that I can have 10 days. And the reason for that is just to make sure parents can participate. It's to make sure your schedule is clear, to make sure IEP teams are not meeting without you. And then also important are the 5-day rules. There's 2 of them. So one, the 5-day rule says that parents should receive documents that will be discussed at the meeting at least 5 school days. Okay, so know the difference between calendar days and school days prior to the meeting. So if you're expecting to discuss your child's progress, or you're expected to come in and talk about behavior data, or you're doing an annual review, you have to receive any documents that are going to be discussed at least 5 school days prior to the meeting. Okay, so you should be getting a draft IEP, should be getting report card, progress notes, present levels, all that kind of information. The same goes for any assessments. So if any assessments have been done and you're going to be discussing them, you have a right to see them 5 days in advance of the meeting in writing. And then after the meeting, there's also a 5-day rule. So teams are meant to send the meeting minutes to you 5 school days after the meeting, okay? So within 5 school days after the meetings, you should have your meeting minutes. If you don't, then you can certainly contact the school and ask for them because, again, that's within your rights. And we call these documents that are provided to you in writing as prior written notice. And that just means that schools are required to give you written notice anytime the school adds, changes, or denies educational services, or the school might want to change placement. So nothing can be done without you being notified about it and having the opportunity to agree to it or disagree with it. Again, this gives parents time to respond And if the school fails to send you prior written notice, then it's violating the law. So that's really important. Many schools do not abide by these rules, but you need to know them so that you can ask for what is rightfully yours and your child's. Okay, so I like to always go over with your child's IEP in hand. We're going to start by knowing a couple key dates. And so I want you to look at that front page of your child's IEP, and that's where you'll see their annual IEP annual review date. In this example, it's May 15th, 2023, just as an example. So what does that mean? That means that that was the last time that you met, that this IEP is in effect from May 15th, 2023. When will we look at the new IEP? When will we create a new IEP? That will be 5/15/2024, the projected annual review date. And that means that you have to meet by that date. Okay, so you should receive something for this child. They should receive notice sometime in April of an upcoming IEP meeting. Also important is to look at your child's evaluation date. This is the date when assessments were last done, or most recently done, or discussed. In this case, the most recent evaluation of the child was in 2022. So as you know, children have a right to reevaluation every 3 years. So the next evaluation is planned for April of 2025. So I say that because those dates will be on there. Every child's IEP will include dates like this, most recent evaluation date, and then the projected evaluation date 3 years later. If you have concerns before the 3 years, you can absolutely call an IEP meeting to discuss whether other assessments are necessary or whether you think new assessments need to be done. So as long as it's more than a year out, you can talk to the team about assessments again. So you have a right to request them at any time, just not less than 1 year in between assessments. Okay, let's see. Sorry. Okay, so where to look for quarterly progress? This could be kind of confusing because the progress report quarters may not align to the school calendar quarters. Okay, so for many of us, our children's IEP might, again, in this example, the child's IEP began in March. So in this example, the first quarter of the IEP ends March 31st, 2023. The second quarter of the IEP ends in June of 2023. And the third quarter ends in October of 2023. So you can see that quarter one of the school year is really 10/31/2023, but quarter three of your child's IEP is that date. So it gets a little bit confusing, and that's why things are not always in the right order. And again, it aligns to the date on your child's IEP. So these are I'm just highlighting this again so you can see the difference. Third quarter's end of school year is the first quarter of your child's IEP, or this child's IEP. And ESY is always in report 5 if your child attends ESY. So I know that can be a little bit confusing, but it's important to know why things are in the blocks that they're in. Okay, so let's talk about the very easy steps to tracking progress. And I really want you to know for yourself whether your child is making sufficient progress midway into the school year. It's one thing to call an advocate and have them do the work for you, but it's really easy for you to know how to do this yourself and at least get a good sense of whether your child is making progress that's expected and how close they are to meeting their goals. So again, even though this might be the second quarter of the school year, we have 2 quarters to look at in terms of data to know whether we're making progress. It's also important to know that, after 2 quarters, your child should have settled in. They should have trusting relationships with the adults that are working with them. We should have behaviors under control, all that kind of stuff. So we can't say, oh, we just need to give them time. They're settling in. That's why they haven't achieved anything. Nope, by now we should be making some progress. I also really want you to know for yourself when your child's doing great. So sometimes as parents, we're just so happy when our children, are achieving things, and we love when the progress reports come out and say, achieve, achieve, achieved. But really, if your child's achieving everything too quickly, then that means the goals are probably too easy for them. And so we just want to make sure that we are maintaining an ambitious, goals for our kids. We're keeping our presumption of their competence high. We really do want to be aggressive in what they're learning. So if they're achieving everything, then we might need to set that bar a little bit higher for them because they're doing so great. Okay, so if you're a Word person or an Excel person or a pen and paper person, it doesn't matter. Choose one that you're comfortable with, and then you're going to create your tracking document, okay? So the first thing that you're going to do is hide for each goal area. So you'll go to the section of your child's IEP where their goals are, and that's section 4 of the IEP. At the top, it'll say section 4, goals. And you're going to look at the objectives. And so for each goal area, you're going to write out each of the objectives. So here's just an example because I want to show you how we're going to highlight the criteria. In this objective, it states, given a simple sentence and capitalization or punctuation rules, the student will edit the sentence with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials measured by teacher-made chart log by May 2024. Okay, so that's a lot of information right there. So what are we going to highlight? We're going to highlight the following. Given a simple sentence and capitalization punctuation rules. So that is what the child is given. That's the support that they're given. So they'll have a sentence and they will have the rule, capitalization and punctuation rules there with them to look at. Okay, so those are the supports that are given. The objective is the student will edit the sentence. And what's the criteria? It has to be with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials by May 2024. So those are all the really important bits of information that we want to write on our tracking sheet. So we're going to have what he's going to be given, what the child's going to be given, the support they're going to be given, what they need to do, how accurate they need to be. So they don't have to get it 100% right the whole time. They can get, 5 of the 4 of the 5 punctuation rules right. And it has to be on 4 out of 5 occasions. So 4 out of 5 times that they're doing this activity, the child has to get at least 80%. Okay, so that's what this goal means. Okay, so in this example, what is the objective and what is the criteria that you'll be tracking? I'm going to just give you a minute to look at it and see if you can figure some of this out. So what is the objective? What are we hoping to do? What is the skill that we want to have? So in this example, the skill is that the child will correctly sequence the events, okay? That's the objective. That's what we want them to do. The criteria is that they won't be given any more than 1 verbal prompt. They'll be giving 5 events that they have to sequence, and they have to sequence them on 4 out of 5 occasions. Okay, so those are everything that we're looking at. So no more than 1 prompt, a verbal prompt. Sometimes it might say a verbal or visual prompt. They have to sequence the 5 events in correct order. And they'll be given the 5 events. And then on 4 out of 5 occasions, they have to put it in the right order. Okay, so if it does not say an accuracy, like if it doesn't say 80% accuracy each time they do it, then it's implied that it should be 100% accuracy. So for this objective to be accomplished, the child would need to put all 5 events in the right order on 4 out of 5 occasions. Okay. Quite often, we see very poor examples of objectives where the objective criteria, so that is, this is based on data, this is based on fact, it's something we can see, will be measured. These are real objectives that I pulled from different IEPs. And I want you to see why these are poorly written and why you would, if you saw your child's objective written this way, you would still have lots of questions because you wouldn't be able to pull out very much of the criteria, right? So in objective 1, it says by May 2024, the student will engage with peers. Okay, so are we looking for engagement with peers? What does that mean exactly? Does that mean waving hello, or is engaging, interacting with peers during structured play or unstructured play? And for how long? Is engaging with peers 15 seconds, or is it 20 minutes of an activity? Will the child require any adult modeling or any adult support to do this? So these are the types of things that are missing from this objective. And how often? How are we going to measure it? Is it every time the child comes in contact with a peer, they're going to engage? Or is it just out on 80% on 4 out of 5 occasions? So when we're taking data on 4 out of 5 occasions, or 100%, the student's going to engage with peers. So we need to add a little bit more to this one. So if I saw this come home and I was trying to track the progress, I'd say, well, I don't even know what the baseline is. I don't know where we're starting. I don't know what we're measuring. And I would go back and have that rewritten. Another example, by May 2024, the student will follow teacher direction to initiate all academic tests in a timely manner. So again, that's not really written completely. We don't know what a timely manner is. We don't know what a timely manner for the student is. A timely manner for me may be different than a timely manner for you. So we want to know, does the child get more time than everybody else? Are there any additional prompts necessary? So the teacher's going to give direction and the child's just going to do it in a timely manner. And what if it takes them, 10 minutes at the beginning of our IEP year? Is our goal going to be that she'll follow the directions within 5 minutes by the end of the year? If that's our goal, then we need to specifically say that. So again, if at this point you notice the problem with an objective as written, it's okay to ask for it to be revised. Just call it to the attention of the teacher, ask for clarification, ask for that goal or objective to be revised to include all the criteria that it should. I don't see too many problems with Howard County IEPs anymore. They are pretty specific. But if you come across an objective that you're unsure of course, just talk to your teacher about it. Okay, so after you have that tracking document, so you're going to take all of your kids' objectives in each of the areas, whether it's reading foundations or reading comprehension, written expression, every area you're going to make a section with objective 1, 2, 3, and 4 under that. Each objective, you're going to just highlight what the criteria is. Then at the end of each quarter, you're going to get out your tracking document and analyze the progress report. So you're going to transfer the data that's in the progress report to your tracking document. Okay, so if we go back to that original example we used, where we had the capitalization punctuation rules, the student's going to edit it. This might be what we see. So when we first introduced the goal back in last school year, the child was making progress on it, 60% on 4 out of 5 trials. So they're doing 60%, 4 out of 5 trials. Then in November, we noticed, they're 70% accurate. So they're more accurate, but only on 3 out of 5 trials. And in January, now they're 70% accurate on 4 out of 5 trials. So on more occasions, they're still getting 70%. So what do we hope we see next? We hope we're going to see making progress on 80% on 3 out of 5 trials. And then by May, by the child's actual IEP, the child will have achieved it. So this is what we're looking for. We're almost there. And by the end of the year, we have achieved the objective. That's the type of progress that we're going to look at. And for many of our kids, progress is slow. So we may not see huge jumps. We may see 60%, then 62%, or 75 to 80. The idea being that we want to be going forward and not backwards. If you notice there's regression, and many of our children do regress, that is something to call to the teacher's attention right away. I noticed that he's doing worse this quarter than last. What are we doing differently, or what seems to be the problem? Okay, so it's an occasion to say, hey, I'm really paying attention to this. So then we're going to create objective. So our last step is to create objective data-driven statements from your tracking data. And why do we do this? We do this so that we are prepared for the meeting. So if we can look at the objective and the data and make sense of it, then we have a really strong case to go in with a data-driven statement that says my child is making progress or is not making sufficient progress. Okay, so if we were to look at this goal again, if we got down to say March of 2024, 80% on 3 trials, and then in April, I'm sorry, in May, we noticed that he's 80% on 4 out of 5 trials. That means he has achieved it. So I would write a statement for myself that says, according to the present levels in the new draft IEP, it was achieved with 80% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials. Okay, that's a really data-driven statement, right? That gives you confidence that that goal has been achieved. But if we were to take the same thing and we look here and the child's not making adequate progress, they stayed 60% accurate across the whole year. They even went down on the number of trials, on only 3 out of 5 trials. The students maybe made progress from the baseline. Let's say perhaps the baseline was, 60% on 2 out of 5 or something like that initially. But there's not sufficient progress here, right? We'd even be saying this child is regressing. We'd be worried if even at the end, if it said, 70% accuracy on 3 out of 5 trials, that's still not a whole year's worth of progress where we thought we were going to be. So we're going to say, yep, you know what, we're making progress, but it's not sufficient progress to achieve the goal. And we're going to write that kind of statement out. And this, again, if we're looking here and we're saying, a child is making 60% accuracy on 4 out of 5 trials in June. Again, great. You know what? We're doing fine. The child's making progress. They're getting more than half right. But in November, if we say that we're sliding back, that we really haven't made progress, I'm going to put a question mark next to that one. I'm going to make sure I keep an eye on this objective and see if we don't see where we go in the next quarter. If by the 3rd quarter, you notice that we're staying the same, that is definitely a red light. That is definitely not okay. We want to call that to the teacher's attention. We want to find out again what they're doing differently, what other strategies are necessary, if scaffolded goals are needed, because maybe the skill's too hard and we need to back up a little bit. So those are all the things that you really want to keep an eye on. Again, maybe the child needs more support. Maybe they need to go over the capitalization and punctuation rules again. Is it all the punctuation rules are having problems with, or just 2 of them? Those are the types of things that you could ask, but it takes conversation with the teacher. It really takes digging into that IEP. And I just want to remind you that objective data is required, okay? So when teachers, and you can see this a lot of times in the progress notes, and you may not, again, it sounds great, right? Oh, so-and-so is doing great this quarter, such an excellent quarter. But what does that mean to an objective person reading it? If I don't know the child and I pick that up, so good, he's having a good year, but what does that really mean? We have to have that objective, quantitative, measurable data to really show us, whether that child is making progress across all evaluators, so that mom and dad know he's making progress, the teacher knows he's making progress, and that's so an objective observer would know that he's making progress as well, because we could see the data. Great job means he's gone from 60% to 90%. We need numbers, okay? We need to know what that means. Or if he's done a great job greeting his peers, is he greeting all of his peers? Is he greeting 2 of his peers? What does that look like? It can mean different things to different people. Okay, so it's always important when you see great job, really doing well with, push the teacher to explain what that means. Okay, so that there are many evaluation methods by which your child's progress may be assessed. It could be anything from like work samples to a teacher chart, informal observation. It could be formal tests and evaluations, classroom assessments. It's important for you to know how your child's progress is going to be tracked on each goal, okay? So every goal has a tracking method. And you'll see that on your child's IEP in the goal area, there will be a method of measurement. Or it might say tracking, but that method of measurement is really important to pay attention to, because if here we have an observation record or a teacher report, that means that you should have access to that. So if you wanted to say, can I see your chart? Can I see that log? Can I see your data sheet? You can go in and look at that with teacher. Not often will teachers send home the raw data, but they should be able to let you, come in and look at it with you. Work samples, again, the teachers, if work samples is how it's going to be measured, then you should be able to see those work samples, okay? And there are many different data collection types. Frequency data means how many times, so 7 out of 10 correct responses, or 10 out of 10 times the child turned in his homework. Duration means how long, so is the child able to stay in a small group for an entire session or only for 2 minutes? How often does he have to take a break? Latency is how much time it takes to get started, right? So after I prompt the child, how long does it take him to get going? So if I say, okay, start your work, do I expect him to start the work in 1 minute or 10 minutes? Task analysis is another data collection type, and that's measuring the many steps within a task. So how many steps within a task are mastered? So if we were talking about him completing classwork, we might say, okay, they started classwork on time, they completed the classwork, and they turned it in. And we might give them a check for each of the things that they did. Or if we're teaching a hand washing routine, they turned on the water, they put soap on the hands, they washed their hands, they turned off the water, and they dried the hands. That's task analysis. Okay, we break it down and we measure each of the steps. Level of independence is how much support is needed. So very often for our kids with autism and without, with other disabilities, we will see prompts included in our children's goals and objectives. And that just means that it's okay for us to give this child a prompt. So this child might need a visual prompt, might need a verbal prompt, a gestural prompt, pointing to something, or a physical prompt, actually helping him pick up his hand and write, or help, whatever it may be. So it's really important to pay attention to the prompts. We want to try to fade prompts over time. So if one goal is achieved early, or if a goal is, really close to being achieved, we might want to say, okay, can we drop back on the prompts, right? We need to fade those prompts. Our kids become really prompt dependent really easy. So each year we want to kind of up that ante a little bit for them to become more and more independent. And then rubric, for many of our older students, we'll have rubrics, how many, if they're writing a paragraph, we might ask them, we might, take data on, was there an introduction, was there a thesis, was there a topic sentence, that kind of thing. And a behavior chart is also a rubric. Okay, also important are accommodations. So again, quite often you will find this from your child's IEP. That's section 3, and we will look. What we want to do is pay attention to the progress notes. So when we get our children's progress notes home, we'll find a whole bunch of narrative from the teacher and lots of really great information. And that will tell us to go to the accommodations and make sure that the accommodations the teachers say they're giving and are helpful are also included in the child's IEP. Okay, so a couple examples here. So with adult supports and prompting, the student is more successful, blah, blah, blah. So what might this tell me? So I might go to the objectives and look and see if the objectives have prompts in them, because we know that the child can do it if they can do a better job if they have the adult supports and prompt. So are those in place? Do we need to add the support? Do we need to make a plan for fading that support? When an adult support enters the room and asks the student to step outside of the classroom to communicate how he's feeling, the student is much more successful de-escalating or remaining in a calm state. Okay, so again, if we have data to support that the child does better de-escalating outside of the classroom, then let's talk about the behavior plan. Is there a behavior plan that lists this as a strategy to assist with calming? And if it doesn't, it should, because we want the child to be successful at de-escalating and remaining calm. And if it just means that they're allowed to step outside and talk to an adult outside of the classroom, then that should be an accommodation, right? That should be something that we're providing as a behavioral strategy. In this example here, we have a goal, and it might include a teacher and a speech language pathologist giving feedback, okay? So the student does not read aloud in classroom. That's what the teacher says. But then the speech language teacher might say in a small group, the student reads aloud from the text with 80% accuracy. So what is this joint statement saying to us? perhaps the student's more comfortable and capable in a small group. And so since we have the data to support this, it allows us to go in and say, let's talk about this as an area. Is my child struggling on a particular skill when he's reading aloud in the big group? Is he having anxiety about reading aloud in the classroom? And if that's the case, do we just need to revise the objective in the IEP so that his reading is done in that small group environment? Okay, so we're taking data on him reading aloud only in the small group. If we have a statement like, oh, the student has difficulty sitting through circle time and seems to get antsy quickly, well, we don't want to stop there. We know that the child's getting antsy, so we want to say, how beneficial is circle time if the child's just moving around and wiggling all the time, right? It's probably not very, very effective or very beneficial. So then what would the team discuss? Maybe a supportive chair, maybe some fidgets, or sitting closer to the teacher, perhaps. Maybe some scheduled breaks. It might just be too long for them to sit for 15 minutes of circle time. We don't want to just leave it there and expect the behavior to get better on its own. We really want to give the children the supports that they need so that it does not take away from their learning. Okay. Student has trouble knowing when a computer is necessary in the classroom and when it is not, and frequently has a hard time putting the computer away when the writing assignment is finished. Okay, well, that's pretty typical, right? Most kids do enjoy being on the computer. But if the student doesn't know when the computers are to be used, why not create a visual schedule or a checklist, right? That explicitly lays out the class for the day and makes known the computer time and the non-computer activities. So we want to let the child in on the plan. If the writing assignment is to write 5 sentences and check for punctuation, then the instruction list could say, write 5 sentences, check for punctuation, then close your computer. So it sets out really clearly what's expected for the child. And that way we shouldn't have as much trouble. We can work towards that as a goal in self-management and behavior to know to close the computer when the prompt says close the computer. Okay. And these, again, I'm sharing so many of these because I really want you to take a look and dig into what your teachers are saying about your kids and, you know, the clues that they're giving you that might lead to more accommodations or that might just lead to more support, that might lead to different goals. If a student is sharing feelings most with Miss Smith and often wants to talk to her when upset, then again, you know, in this case, perhaps we want to have a flash pass so that the student can always go see Miss Smith or can, you know, go to the counseling office when he's upset. It's really very important for some students to have a trusted adult when they are feeling dysregulated. And, you know, why bring on a behavior and trigger something worse when we know what the child needs and benefits in talking with Miss Smith. Let's just put that in there as a go-to. Give that child a flash pass so that they can just leave the classroom when they need to and go seek the support that they need to. When he has the adult support and prompting to focus on writing, the student comes up with great ideas in the text that describe reasoning, opinions, actions, thoughts, and or feelings. It might say creative. I can't read it on my screen because it's covered. But again, if the child's able to come up with all these details, then maybe we should use a checklist or a more detailed instruction sheet on how many specific details we want them to come up with. You know, do any of his objectives require a checklist, right? So are they written to include a checklist? Should the students have a chart to complete? If the student can read, so instead of depending on verbal reminders, you know, maybe we just give them those visuals so that they can check their stuff and follow along on the instructions. And rubrics, you know, again, are great for this. So maybe that's the evaluation method that we use. It says that students benefit from sensory strategies to assist in maintaining attention, know what those specific sensory strategies are. This is where you want to push the teachers to say, well, what exactly is that? You know, what are some of those sensory strategies? And you want to be able to list those in the clarify section of the accommodations, just so everybody knows we're not limiting the sensory strategies, but such as a fidget, such as, you know, taking a break and walking to the water fountain, whatever those sensory strategies are, we just want to capture as many of them as are successful. And that changes year to year. So you might have to change that every year. But again, if I were to pick up your child's IEP and go to teach them, I would want to know what the sensory strategies are to help them with maintaining attention. And if we have a student that elopes from the gym every time an activity begins, then we need to look at why are they eloping, right? So that might say, hey, maybe we need to have the school psychologist and come in and take a look at this, and maybe see what they think that behavior is about. Doesn't have to be a whole formal behavior analysis, but it really could just be put some eyes on him and see what you think. He's eloping every time. Is it maybe that it's just overstimulating or too loud and he needs headphones or a visual break, schedule with a break? Those are some clues that we might need to ask a few more questions. So the questions will be coming up next, and I know that's a lot that we rushed through. But first, I just wanted to show you understood.org is a really great website for parents, and it has some, or Undivided, also undivided.io. These are sheets right from there, but they have lots of these online where you can go and download these goal planners. And as you take your child's IEP, this can help you map out all the details that should be included in each of your child's objectives. Okay, so you should be able to look, these are specific IEP goals that are measurable. And again, this is the type of thing that you want to see. You want to know what each of these conditions, skills, supports, all the methods of measurement are, so that you know whether your child's making progress or not. The resources that are here for you, always Pathfinders for Autism has some great articles. Rightslaw.com is wonderful. Understood.org, again, so parent friendly. And then of course you have Disability Rights Maryland and Parents Place of Maryland. Parents Place of Maryland also offers IEP support. And if you would like free special education support, then you can email at I'm sorry, that should say info@autismsocietymd.org. But that is, that's the support that the Autism Society offers. And we're happy to help you with questions that you have. But it's really helpful when you call an advocate or anyone for support that you already have an idea of whether your child's making progress or not. And not just like a gut instinct that says, I just don't feel like they're really making progress. Why not? Give me some data, give me some real information on that so that I can help and dig in. And we'll save a little bit of time if you've already done that work ahead of time. Okay, so that wraps up the presentation. We have recorded it, so it'll be up live, and we'll put the slides up so that you'll have access to the slides as well. But I'm happy to look at the chat and see if I can, answer questions for you. I'm going to put back up here the Autism Society's contact information and some of the resources. Okay. Yes, the webinar will be recorded, and the webinar is being recorded, and it will be uploaded to the Autism Society website. Okay, so why do we have to have an evaluation every 3 years was a question that was asked. You don't have to have an evaluation, but you have to have a discussion about an evaluation every 3 years. It's called reevaluation. It's part of the law, part of the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And the reason why is that we want teams to come back together every 3 years to ask the specific question, is there anything else this child needs that we have missed? So is there perhaps a disability we've missed? Should we do educational testing? Do we want a new baseline of where our child was 3 years ago and where they are today? That's all based on standardized assessments, okay? So it's different than what they get every day in their classrooms. These are standardized assessments that are done with them. So you'll get a much bigger picture of the child, and you can track, again, their progress over longer stretches of time. So there are cognitive assessment that might be done. That's usually part of one of the assessments that you have. There are educational assessments. So again, standardized tests in writing and reading foundations and, math. And then there are other assessments that go along with just perhaps some adaptive skills. So skills that your child has that are, kind of then rate it in comparison to peers, so that you kind of see where they are just in terms of their independence and their social abilities and that kind of thing. We might have a new disability, right? So perhaps we haven't uncovered that our child has real trouble with writing. And when they do the assessment, they find that, wow, your child really has a learning disability around writing or written expression. That's something that we want to know, because then your child will, we want to get more services for that. So Sometimes, again, we're pointing out things, we are changing diagnoses, for many children, they may come into school with a diagnosis of developmental delay that needs to be changed to something else by the time they're 8. And a lot of times assessments are necessary in order to do that. So that's why the law says that every 3 years you have to have an evaluation. You have to have an evaluation discussion. Parents can decline the evaluations. So you don't have to sign off on them. The school cannot test without your permission. So it's in an IEP meeting. It'll be a reevaluation meeting where you come in and you say, do we believe we need other tests? Again, it's up to you whether you do it or not, but it really is helpful to have them done every so often so that you can truly track a child's progress every couple of years, because our kids grow so much. And so, what you assessed for when they were 2.5 is very different from when they're 5.5, and the same from when they're 8 and when they're 18. We really want to have those stepping stones in between. But again, you don't have to do it. You don't have to sign off on it. Okay, so can our RBT come to school and be paid by our private insurance? I can't answer on behalf of the school system, but I'm going to say they probably will not let you do that. And that's for many reasons, including the privacy of other kids, and also just that it's not a school system employee. So you could have your RBT come in and evaluate. Come in and observe. Parents are welcome to send in others to observe their children in the classroom to see if there's maybe some other ideas your RBT would like to send forward. But to have your RBT in the classroom every day, that's generally not something that school systems will allow. Again, simply because I'm guessing it's because of insurance and just, teacher management of the classroom and everything else. You are welcome to ask that question of your team, however, they may surprise me. Shall a parent suggest IEP meeting after every report card? No. If you have concerns, you can usually pick up the phone or send an email to your teacher to say, hey, I have some concerns about this and this. If they are substantial, then absolutely you want to have an IEP meeting. But the idea being, get the progress report, track it. If the child is doing well and you can see it by the very data that you've tracked, right? Because you've taken the time to track that data 1 quarter to the next, you will know if your child's making progress. If your child's not making progress, if you ever see a not making sufficient progress on your child's IEP, the team has to meet with you. So you don't want to meet. Can you imagine if every child met with their teacher, or every parent met with their child's teacher after every report card? The teachers would never be teaching. So we really only want to meet with them when there's an absolute need. And the way you know whether there's a need or not is by you doing the work, right? So really get the data out, do the work, and then call an IEP meeting if you feel you need it. You have a right to call an IEP meeting whenever you want. So I'm not suggesting you don't have that right, you do. But is it necessary? Probably not. Probably not. So it really would be a case by case. Are we allowed to request that other teachers involved in our kids' education, like EEE or PE or any other teacher, get involved in the IEP, or at least get information on what strategies we're using when there is a behavior situation? So if there's a behavior situation that happened in the PE classroom and the team meets to discuss it, then absolutely that teacher should be present. If on the report card it's saying that, oh, this child's really struggling with behaviors in PE, we'd really like to see him settle down in the PE classroom, then I might say to the case manager, can I have an informal conference with you, the case manager, and the PE teacher to see what additional supports might be necessary? So some of those might already be in IEP and they're not being implemented. Some of those might be in a behavior plan and perhaps the PE teacher didn't even know about that. So we always want to check back and say, should he be receiving more support by the behavior plan or by accommodations that aren't being provided? And that's why, he's having a challenging time. Or is it something that we need to discuss further and really add to the IEP? If you add anything to the IEP, obviously you have to have an IEP team meeting to do that. So again, parents have a right to call an IEP meeting at any time, and you have a right to request the attendance of people that are educating your child. So if you would like the PE teacher to be in attendance, you can request that. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna hang tight on the one just because I don't want it to be too specific for this. I want to keep it for the good of the group. Okay, so right. So it does take a lot of time to complete an FBA. An FBA is a formal process. It's a functional behavior assessment, and the team does get time to do that because they need to collect data in more than one setting. So they can't just, collect data in one classroom. They need to look at the child across many different settings. They need to collect data across many weeks, days, weeks, different times of day, to really look and see what's going on. If it is, if it doesn't seem to be that distracting, and to you, if you're like, oh, this is just silly behavior, why do we have to do a whole functional behavior assessment about it? It may be that it really isn't impacting your child's ability to benefit from the instruction, right? So if it's having an educational impact, we absolutely do want to collect data on it. We absolutely do want that time to put things in place. It may be that while we're in the process of collecting data, we figure out, okay, wait, this is just silly behavior. He just needs X, Y, Z. And it doesn't require us to go much further. We've already solved it. So it doesn't mean that teams aren't doing anything while data is being collected, right? They're likely trying lots of things. But teams are allowed, by law, that much time to collect the data. Okay, so if the goals and objective progress stays stagnant throughout the year, is that sufficient to qualify for ESY? So there is a presentation on our website on ESY that we gave a couple years ago. So I encourage you to look at that because it goes through the criteria of what gets to ESY. So ESY is not meant to teach new skills. It's meant to keep kids where they are if they're in danger of regressing. Okay, so that's why ESY is there. So if your child has had the same level throughout the school year, we definitely want to call attention to that. We want to find out why we're not making progress. It's probably a much bigger conversation. So if a child is not making any progress throughout the school year, I'm going to be asking questions like, is this the right, or is he receiving the right services? Is he receiving enough? Is there the right placement for him? What else do we need to look at? What are we doing differently? So we don't want a child to stay stagnant. The IEP says that within 1 year, we're to make progress, ambitious progress. So what does that look like? And if we're not making that progress, then we certainly want to call that to the team and probably reevaluate the IEP. But there are several criteria that the teams have to go through to determine whether a child attends ESY. Progress is certainly one of those. So again, as far as, your child's goals and objectives, they're written to fill in the gaps. So when our children have IEPs, that is for the special instruction. So that's really it's not just what everybody else is doing, that is specialized instruction that is provided to your child around that IEP goal. So instruction and support that's provided around that IEP goal. If your child should still be receiving access to the grade level curriculum. So in addition to the special ed support that they have working on their individual goals and objectives, they're also doing what other kids are doing. We certainly, assume that teachers are connecting them to the lessons and the curriculum. If you have questions about that and you need examples of it, then you simply ask for an opportunity to talk with your teacher informally and ask them how they're doing that. Ask them to explain it to you so that you know how they're doing it. But that's a good question. You know, if they say, oh yeah, we do it this way, then, you know, you'll feel a lot better. So never keep questions like this to yourself. That's why that special educator is there. And for you to be meaningfully participating in your child's IEP and the whole process in their education, you have to be informed. So when you have questions, you have every right to ask them of the team, to make sure you're staying on track and make sure that, you know, the IEP, if they're achieving everything, you know, meeting goals and objectives, that's great, making progress. Again, if they've achieved everything early in their IEP year, then we might need to step it up a little bit on what we're hoping year to year for our child in terms of what they're capable of. They may be capable of higher steps. So we want to look at that too. Okay, so we're right up on the 8 o'clock hour. I think I answered all the questions. The ones that are specific, again, for those that are specific, I invite you to reach out to me directly. Let me see if my email is anywhere. You can use this info at, and send those questions to that email and I'll answer you directly. Again, it is free special education support that we provide. So when you email and you ask to speak to a special education advocate, that's the email and that's the phone number that you would call to then, you know, be put in touch with me, and then I'll set an appointment for us to talk. But I'd be happy to answer specific questions for you related to your child's IEP.
I'll just say that the email is info@autismsocietymd.org. I put it in the chat. If you do send it to the howardautism.org, it will still come, but eventually that will get phased out. But the correct address is info@autismsocietymd.org. Okay, well, thank you so much, Beth. As always, so informative. I hope everyone has found that helpful. We encourage you to contact our office if you have more questions. We have resource coordinators that can help you. And if you have very specific types of issues and concerns, we can make a referral to Beth if you're in Howard County. Because of the way she's funded, she can assist families who live in Howard County. They do not have to have children that attend public school in Howard County. It could be a private school, but the family does need to live in Howard County. That said, if you're not in Howard County, there are other resources that we can direct you to. Parents Place of Maryland also helps families with their IEP questions, and X Minds in Montgomery County does the same. So please reach out to us and we'll help connect you as necessary. But I think that we're all done. So thank you so much, Beth, and I will stop recording and finish up the webinar. Good night, everyone.
Good night.